Good morning, friends. The light outside my window is a soft rinse of gold, the kind that makes you think the day could still be gentle with you. The kettle is whispering on the stove, and the house is so quiet I can hear the clock practicing its seconds. Maybe you're sipping your first coffee, or maybe you're still curling deeper into the covers, pretending time can't find you. Either way, I'm glad you found me. Here's a bracing truth to go with that first sip you might not survive if you keep believing family equals kindness. Sometimes the hand that guides you to your seat is the same hand that chose the seat beside the trash. So before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now dim the lights, maybe let a fan hum in the background, and come with me into this morning's story. I should have known the moment the limousine doors opened and the heat of late summer came up in waves from the asphalt. The venue was one of those reclaimed warehouses dressed in fairy lights and polished concrete, a cathedral to good taste. The air smelled like roses and rented tuxedos. I adjusted the bracelet Edward gave me on our 40th anniversary and told myself to breathe. It was Samuel's wedding, a day for hope and soft edges. I had promised myself I would keep mine soft. A young woman with a clipboard, cheerful, efficient, the smile of a professional problem solver, met me near the entrance. Name she chirped. Clara Whitman, I said, grandmother of the groom. Her eyes flicked down the list, then up again with a brightness that felt like a pat on the head. Right this way. We zigzagged through round tables dressed in linen and pale hydrangeas, past laughing clusters of guests and the long gleaming head table where Samuel and his bride would sit. The room swelled and thinned like a tide. I let myself float. Just here, the coordinator said, and stopped beside a slim banquet table by a side door, the one used by the staff to wheel in crates and to wheel out other things. The gray bins were tasteful as bins go. Discreetly tucked, discreetly labeled. Trash, one said, in calm sans serif. The other said, recycling, thank you. My chair sat between them and a draft. For a moment, I thought there'd been a mistake, a wrong number in the seating software. I opened my mouth to ask, and then I saw her, Olivia adjusting a place card at the head table, one hand on my son Michael's sleeve as if she were directing traffic. She looked up, saw me, and smiled. The kind of smile that lands lightly and leaves a bruise anyway. I closed my mouth. The clipboard woman gave a satisfied nod and disappeared into the crowd. There are humiliations so deft you almost admire the choreography. The music swelled with a string quartet version of a pop song about forever. Servers floated past, carrying flutes of champagne, and each one, without malice, offered me a glass and then pivoted away to avoid the bins. I sat down. My chair rocked slightly on the concrete. A shim had fallen out or never been there. Behind me, someone tossed a napkin. The bin lid sighed. Odd fact of the day, there's a medieval seating concept called the Great Chain of Being, where everyone from king to kitchen boy had a precise place at table, a cosmology of chairs. We like to think we're past that. We're not. We've just outsourced the assignments to an app and called it hospitality. A cousin I barely recognized sidled over, eyes darting from my face to the bins and back again. Oh, Aunt Clara, she said, how rustic. She winced an apology without offering to help. People are very good at offering sympathy when the cost is spare breath. Across the room, Samuel caught my eye. He looked sun-stunned and happy, oblivious to the tectonics under his feet. He lifted his glass in a shy, private toast, and I lifted mine water, not champagne, back at him. He didn't see the bins. Love edits the background. It's one of its mercies and one of its dangers. I could have asked to move. I could have waved down the clipboard woman and reminded her of titles, grandmother, widow, donor, to the floral fund, and a better chair, would have materialized. But this was a performance, and not mine. If I made a scene, I'd be an old woman with bad manners. If I sat quietly, I'd be an old woman with no power. Choose your costume, Clara. So I did what women my age are very, very good at. I stayed still and I watched. A gust of rumor drifted by with the perfume. She's been slipping. Someone murmured. You know how it is after... Another voice trailed off respectful ellipsis where Edward's name should have been. Olivia had been busy planting soft seeds in soft soil. To the anxious and the bored gossip is just social weather. I touched the inside pocket of my wrap, feeling for the folded envelope I had asked my doctor to sign 2 weeks ago, a neuropsych evaluation, as clean as glass. Funny the things you do when you feel a trap being built around you. Funny and not funny at all. Michael came over eventually, the smile he wears when he's already tired of defending his choices to himself. Mom, he said, too bright, isn't this place amazing, industrial chic? It's something I said, and let my eyes flick toward the bins. A small mercy, he flushed. Recognition is often the first apology a man can manage. Olivia handled the seating, he added, as though naming the architect would absolve the architecture. You know how she is about details. Detail is one word for it. Agenda is another. There's a grand academic phrase for this, too performative cruelty. It wears satin and keeps its hands clean. A server leaned in to top off my water and almost bumped my chair into the recycling. So sorry, she whispered. Her eyes met mine, and in that brief exchange, 2 women recognized each other's dignity. She slipped a folded napkin under my wobbly chair leg to steady it. Quiet resistance is a language too. I took out my notebook, the small one with the pebbled cover, and wrote down facts like I was back in school, time of seating. Location relative to bins. Witnesses within earshot. A sentence Olivia had said to me last week wearing concern like a tailored jacket. It must be hard to keep track of details these days. And because humor is sometimes the only tool sharp enough to carve out breathing space, I added 3 lines in the margin. If humiliation were compost, this corner would be very fertile. If industrial chic means sitting with the infrastructure, I'm a trendsetter. If family comes with a seating chart, I'd like to RSVP no next time. The music shifted. The MC tapped the mic, and the room obediently glittered in his direction. Toasts. Of course. There would be a blessing from the pastor, a joke from the best man, something sweet from the maid of honor about friendship lasting even after the hair extensions come out. I watched Olivia glide to the head table and rest one hand on the back of Samuel's chair. She looked every inch the mother of the groom she had always wanted me not to be. It takes a special kind of hunger to seat an old woman by a bin and call it logistics. The MC cleared his throat. Now I hear we have a request for a few words from our very own. He checked the card, grinning Grandma Clara. My name fell through the room like a pebble into a glassy pond. Heads turned. Olivia's smile froze, then cracked, then fixed itself again. Somewhere behind me, the bin lid sighed. I stood. Carefully, because dignity loves steadiness. I smoothed my wrap, felt the trained weight of years settle into my spine, and picked up my glass of water. 1 step, 2, 3. The room opened like a hush. And there, halfway to the mic, I knew a seat beside the trash is only a throne if you decide not to rise. Halfway to the mic, I could hear the room more clearly than the quartet. Cutlery chimed against porcelain, a glitter of sound that pretended to be laughter. Glass stems kissed rims, plink, plink, as if the silverware were practicing how to applaud without committing. Whispered air currents moved faster than the AC. Is she okay? Poor thing. You know, after her husband. The rumor spread like a scent you can't place, familiar, sour engineered. A bridesmaid in pale sage intercepted me with a smile that overreached. "Do you need an arm, Mrs. Whitman?" Translation: "You look fragile enough to topple." "I've been walking since 1956, I said gently, and kept going. Odd fact of the day, one theory says people started clinking glasses to prove their drinks weren't poisoned, a friendly slosh to mingle liquids. Whether or not that's true, tonight's clinking sounded less like safety and more like rehearsal. Everyone practicing their lines for the play called We Did the Polite Thing. 2 groomsmen parted to let me through. One attempted a joke VIP, coming through the kind of humor that scrubs a stain it refuses to admit is there. A cousin brushed my sleeve. "So brave of you to speak," she whispered. "Brave is what people call you when they expect you to break." Olivia materialized near the head table, a curator guarding her exhibit. "Clara," she said, "sweetness poured over gravel. Keep it short." "We don't want you to get tired." Her eyes glittered with a private victory, the kind you don't put on a registry but hope arrives anyway. "I'll try not to exhaust myself with sincerity," I murmured. Her smile held, but the corners faltered. I reached the microphone and rested a hand on the stand, not quite taking it, feeling the pulse steady in my wrist. The MC leaned in, his voice polite, but a little breathless, as if he too sensed a weather change. "Whenever you're ready." An academic phrase floated up from some dusty shelf in my head: pluralistic ignorance. That's when everyone in a room privately doubts something, but because they think they're the only one, they go along with it. Tonight, it was the performance that I was wilting, that this seating was accidental, that Olivia's concern was care. A whole room cosplaying courtesy, while truth stood in the coat room waiting for its ticket to be called. I let the pause lengthen. Pauses are useful. They invite people to hear themselves. In the quiet, I could distinguish the textures of whisper, pity, threaded, curiosity, threaded, cruelty, threaded. Someone near the hydrangeas hissed, "She shouldn't be up there." Another voice. But the MC, a third. Olivia said, "She's been, the ellipsis again, like a chalk outline around a living person." From the corner of my eye, I saw Samuel's face turn toward me, hopeful and soft. He believed in the best version of this moment, because that's what love does on a wedding day. I honored that belief by refusing to let this be a spectacle about my supposed frailty. If I was going to be seen, I would choose how. Humor. My old oxygen tank clicked on. If gossip burned calories, we could power the string lights for a week. If concern had frequent flyer miles, some folks here would be platinum. If cutlery counts as applause, I just got a standing ovation from the salad forks. The MC cleared his throat again, a cue I ignored. I wasn't stalling. I was aligning. I thought of the envelope in my wrap pocket, the one with the tidy letterhead, the doctor's signature like a small ship's anchor at the bottom. Weeks ago, I had sat in a quiet office and answered questions: today's date, subtract 7s from 100, recall 5 nouns in 5 minutes. It felt ridiculous and dignified at once. Ridiculous because I knew who I was. Dignified because I also knew what people were saying. I had decided then to collect receipts, actual notarized, inconvenient to deny receipts. Behind me, the bin lid sighed again, an odd little punctuation. It steadied me. Whatever else this night wanted to be, it would not make me smaller than plastic and hinges. Michael stood up from the second row, hands flexing at his sides. For a second, I thought he might reach me, put an arm around my shoulders, tip the scales with a son's plain presence. He didn't. The diffusion of responsibility, another tidy term, kept him at his place. When everyone can act, no one does. Near the bar, a guest said the quiet part nearly out loud. Olivia said, "Clara gets confused in the evenings." Ah. sundowning. She'd upgraded her script from whisper to clinical. The efficiency would be impressive if it weren't aimed at me. I pressed my palm to the cool metal of the stand and looked out at a sea of curated joy centerpieces in pale blues and creams chairs wrapped in ribbons like promises, faces flushed with champagne and the righteousness of attendance. Weddings are great engines of status, signaling another useful phrase. You can audit a whole family in one evening if you know where to look, who sits where, who serves, who assumes. A server passed close, whispering so only I could hear, "Take your time. Such small mercies. They count double." I let my gaze settle on Olivia. She'd chosen a shade of dress that cameras love, somewhere between bone and pearl, and she wore the confidence of a woman who'd storyboarded this evening down to the fork placements. For a flicker of a moment, I almost pitied her. It must be exhausting to maintain a world that depends on other people being less. Then I remembered the chair by the bins and decided my pity could find a more ambitious hobby. A hush rippled forward as people realized the pause had become a choice. I opened the small notebook in my hand, not the envelope yet, and read a single line I had written in a shaky moment earlier that day. Calm is not compliance. Calm is control. The words weren't meant for the room, they were meant for my spine. Still, it helped to see them anchored in ink. Paper, unlike rumor, resists smearing when handled. My fingers brushed the envelope in my wrap. The knowledge of it steadied me like a railing on a steep stair. Behind it, tucked neatly, were 2 more pages, a notarized statement from my banker about account access protocols I had tightened, and a printed summary of the charitable trust I had set up last month. Receipts plural. If a story is going to be told about me, it will be footnoted. The MC, bless him, sensed that the moment belonged to me, or it belonged to no one. He backed away a step, palm open, a gesture that said, "Go on if you will." I inhaled and felt the room breathe with me the way a crowd does when it leans toward a tightrope walker. There's a difference between spectacle and witness. Spectacle wants failure, witness wants truth. I decided to reward witness. "Good evening," I said, finally taking the mic. My voice surprised me. Warm, steady, the kind of sound that fills a kitchen at 6 a.m. when the toast pops and the dog sighs. I'll keep this brief. I watched Olivia's shoulders release a millimeter, then added brief but clear. They rose again. But before I offered the room my clarity, I let myself look one more time at Samuel, at his nervous smile, and the way his bride's hand was tucked into his, like a small bird choosing to stay. It helped me choose my next sentence carefully. And then I touched the envelope. Memory flared clean and bright, the doctor's patient regard, the crisp scent of paper, the click of a notary's stamp, the feeling of being seen accurately. I would not swing at shadows tonight. I would simply turn on the light. I lifted the envelope where the front row could see the letterhead. I wasn't ready to read it yet, that would come, but I wanted the room to understand that the stories they'd been fed were about to meet a story with dates, signatures, and consequences. First, I said thank you for loving my grandson enough to be here. The cutlery went still. The whispers held their breath. Second, I let the second hang like a moon. Some truths deserve their own drum roll. Second, I said into the mic, and the word hovered there, like a small paper boat on a lake. Before I let it sail, I felt the present tug backward, because a second like mine only makes sense if you know the work I did before tonight. So come with me for a minute 2 weeks back to a Tuesday that smelled like rain and printer ink. I'd woken that morning with the odd certainty a stage was being built around me. Tasteful curtains, polite lighting a trapdoor marked concern. Olivia had been practicing lines about my forgetfulness with the dedication of a community theater star. It is a particular kind of insult to have your competence questioned by someone who cannot keep track of her own sunglasses. I made coffee, buttered toast, and did what women my age do when the air changes. I packed a purse with receipts. Odd fact of the day, the word receipt used to mean recipe. Centuries ago, doctors wrote RX at the top of prescriptions as shorthand for recipere take thou. Somewhere along the way, receipt shifted from instructions to proof. I decided to have both what to take and what I'd taken. First stop, Dr. Ramirez Neuropsychology. I sat in a room that tried very hard to be comforting plants with shiny leaves, a bowl of peppermints, a painting of a horizon that promised you could still get there. A young technician with kind eyebrows gave me tasks, remember? 5 words. Apple chair, coin river lamp, subtract 7s from 100, draw a clock with the hand set to 10 past 11. Then there were trails to connect patterns to complete a paragraph to recall after a polite delay. I didn't rush. I let the pages and minutes do what they came for, not to find a flaw, but to find me. When Dr. Ramirez returned, she spoke like a person used to telling truths gently. Mrs. Whitman, your performance is squarely within normal limits for your age. Strong, actually. No indications of neurocognitive disorder. We'll write it up clearly. She turned her monitor so I could read the draft dates, scores, interpretation, her signature, a solid line, not a shrug. Please add this, I said, tapping the paragraph where she'd be plain. State that I sought testing proactively because of rumors, and that these results reflect today not a memory of me from 5 years ago or the imagination of someone who would rather manage me than meet me. She smiled. Clear language is a kindness. The report was printed on letterhead heavy enough to double as a coaster. A notary slid in, stamped the last page with that satisfying clunk embossed seal rising like a moon. I tucked the certified copy into a paper sleeve and wrote on the tab, Clarity. Second stop, Seaboard Savings. Banks never changed their scent floor polish toner, the ghost of money. I asked to see Miss Patel, the branch manager who'd watched Edward and me trade checks for decades like kids trading baseball cards. We sat in her glass cubicle, the world buzzing silently beyond. I need you to put in writing. I said that no one can access my accounts without me present in person with identification. Not a family representative. Not someone with a charming smile who claims I've given verbal permission. She nodded. We already require that, but I'll draft a letter that explains your preferences and our procedures, and I'll note your account. We can also add a code word only, you know. Old school, but effective. We chose a word Edward used to say when he finally found his misplaced keys. She printed the statement signed and had it notarized, then added, if anyone shows up asking to change things, we will decline and call you. Another sleeve in the purse tab labeled Access. Third stop, Whitman Family Trust. An empty name 2 weeks earlier, now something with muscle. At Attorney Lee's office, I signed papers that felt like a map to a place I could live. We established a revocable living trust with the bulk of my estate earmarked for scholarships at the community college, women re-entering the workforce, caregivers learning new skills, veterans changing trades. A slice for the library's adult literacy program because I owe books more than I can repay. A sliver for the music department at Samuel's High School where shy kids become loud in the best ways. I want my giving to be my loudest rumor, I told Attorney Lee. And I want it structured so no one can help it toward their pockets. She laughed softly. Then we'll make the guardrails obvious. She drafted the trust with language that even a tired judge could skim and understand, trustees independent of family distributions. Automatic by calendar. A letter of intent in my voice that said exactly why. We updated my will to pour over into the trust and appointed a professional fiduciary. I initialed more margins than a bored 8th grader. My hand cramped in that satisfying, legitimate way. When we were done, Lee slid across a crisp summary sheet, the kind even a hostile reader would struggle to misinterpret. Another sleeve into the purse tab labeled Legacy. On the way home, I stopped at the copy shop. Heavy stock clean edges stapled, neatly aligned, 3 sets of everything each stamped with a little red certified true copy. The clerk, a woman with glitter on her nails and the sort of competence you want piloting your plane, leaned in conspiratorially, planning a heist. Planning a defense, I said. We shared that small grin strangers give each other when they recognize a fellow traveler. At my kitchen table that evening, I arranged the sleeves in my purse like a traveling exhibit, Clarity, Access, Legacy. I added a thin envelope with contact cards, Dr. Ramirez, Ms. Patel, Attorney Lee, handwritten notes beside each available to verify. Then I dialed Patricia. "If you don't hear from me after the wedding, check your mailbox," I said. "There'll be a package to open and a plan to follow." "Impression management," she replied, rolling the academic phrase on her tongue like a peppermint. "If they're staging a story about you, you're staging one back. With footnotes." "That's the hope," I said. "If there's going to be theater, let there be tech rehearsal." Humor kept the nerves from fizzing out of my skin, so I wrote 3 lines at the bottom of my journal. If rumor is, a kite documentation is the string. If concern is a costume, notarization is a harsh dressing room light. If dignity were a handbag, mine has file folders. After that Tuesday, I slept better. Not because the danger dissolved, but because procedural justice, yes, another phrase, was now on my side. Process is a comfort when people aren't. Systems cannot love you, but they can at least behave. And so tonight, when the coordinator marched me to the chair by the bins, and the whispers tried to braid themselves into a noose, I had more than a brittle smile. I had pages. I had names and dates and seals. I had the kind of receipts that don't wilt in a vase. Back at the mic, the room still waiting on my second, I slid a finger inside my wrap and felt the stiff edge of clarity. The envelope clicked against my nail like a metronome. I looked at Samuel and his bride, 2 new people with matching futures, and decided the kindest way to be old in a young room is to model the boring miracle of evidence. "Second," I said, and lifted the letter where anyone who could read a header could see it. I brought something simple. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. When rumors about someone's mind start to do laps around a room, it's polite to let facts take a turn. A few guests laughed, the relieved kind. Olivia didn't. Her face had the expression of a person watching a cake sink in the oven she swore she preheated. I eased the paper from its sleeve. The seal caught the light. The room leaned in, not because they wanted spectacle, though some did, but because witness had finally found a microphone. Second. I let the word settle, then lowered the envelope slightly. Before I get to this, I owe our newlyweds a grandmother's toast. A small nervous laugh rustled the room. The MC smiled with relief. Toasts were territory he understood. Olivia took a step forward as if to negotiate mic time, but the MC's hand, polite practice, hovered just enough to keep the lane clear. "I promise to keep it brief," I said. "And brief looks like 3 blessings and 1 piece of homework." I glanced at Samuel and his bride. First blessing, may your house learn your laughter and echo it back. Second, may apology come quickly and not require a committee meeting. Third, may your kindness to each other be as ordinary as breathing. The bride's shoulders softened. Samuel's mouth did that boyish thing where a grin tries not to be obvious and fails. And the homework I added is to choose every day a story about each other that is generous even when generous is harder than correct. Odd fact for a wedding day, the Romans wore wedding rings on the 4th finger because they believed a vein ran from there straight to the heart, vena amoris. Anatomically questionable, spiritually useful. A ring is a promise, not a GPS. I let the room exhale. When you've lived long enough, you learn that a good toast is not a performance. It's a permission slip. My age-earned truth of the night, the little pocket wisdom I carry like a mint, is this calm isn't the absence of storms. It's the decision to be larger than their noise. It took me 6 decades and some change to learn that, and I'm still practicing. A bridesmaid sniffled. Someone somewhere finally unclenched their cutlery. The quartet found the right volume again. For one small minute, the evening was what it wanted to be, a net for joy. Then the room remembered its other script. Olivia stepped closer, her smile lacquered. Lovely Clara, let's wrap up so dinner can... 2 more sentences I said softly, and because softness can carry further than shouting, the line went quiet. There's a phrase academics like spiral of silence. The more a viewpoint seems dominant, the less anyone challenges it, and the silence becomes proof of its power. Tonight's viewpoint had been that I was fragile, confused, decorative. The spiral had tightened around me like ribbon on a gift that wasn't for me at all. I looked at Samuel again. You deserve a clear room for your vows, I told him. And truth makes rooms clearer. I lifted the envelope an inch. I brought truth on purpose. Olivia's eyes flicked to the DJ, to the MC, to the venue coordinator, the silent choreography of a person used to owning soundtracks. The coordinator clipboard hugged like a shield did not move. The MC did a host's bravest act. He stayed out of the way. Humor is a bridge, so I walked a few easy steps across it. If honesty were on the menu, I'd order seconds and take some home. If opinions had calories, we'd all be sticking to water. If patience were confetti, we'd be ankle deep by now. A few scattered laughs, the brave kind, showed me the room could still be redeemed from spectacle. I slid the envelope into the crook of my arm and let my free hand rest lightly on the mic stand. The metal felt cool level factual. Here's what I won't do, I said. I won't hijack a wedding with family litigation. I won't give gossip the encore it practiced for. I angled the envelope so the first row could see the seal again. But I also won't let polite lies do laps while truth waits in the hallway. Olivia's voice bright as a blade. Clara, no one is lying. We're all just concerned. Concern is a beautiful word, I replied, when it arrives with help and leaves without a receipt. A quirky aside because I can't help myself. Did you know hydrangeas change color based on soil acidity? Same plant, different hue depending on what it's rooted in. Rooms are like that too. Change the pH of the truth in the air and the whole palette shifts. Michael stood halfway up, stalled, then sank down again. He was balancing on the thin wire between normative social influence, do what the crowd expects, and filial backbone, do what your mother taught you. I didn't rescue him. Men must choose their own verbs. I turned back to the couple. Your love is not a prop, I said. So I will make this promise in front of witnesses. What I'm about to say and show is not about me being right. It's about you not spending your first dance dodging rumors that stain. The bride nodded, small, grateful, the way a person nods when the floor under them steadies a little. And then I did something very old-fashioned. I asked permission. Samuel, sweetheart, are you comfortable with your grandmother giving the room 30 honest seconds? He looked at his bride. She squeezed his hand and said, please. Olivia's smile snapped tight, but she didn't own the microphone, and tonight the mic mattered. The MC gave a tiny, you got this gesture with his fingers. Bless that man. Good hosts make safer rooms. I kept my tone easy, almost conspiratorial, as if I were telling a recipe. 30 seconds, then cake. Hold me to it. I tap my wrist as if I wore a watch. I don't. Time and I have moved to a first-name basis. 3 final quick things before the envelope had its turn, because the teacher in me wanted the room to take notes it could use later. 1, I said, when you hear a story about someone's mind, ask, who benefits from that story being believed? two decide to be a witness rather than an audience. Audiences want entertainment. Witnesses want the truth, even when it's quieter. And 3, if you ever find yourself seated by a trash bin, literal or metaphorical, remember that chairs are not verdicts. Stand up, even if your knees complain about it. A ripple of laughter, warmer now. I could feel the spiral loosen a notch. I glanced at the MC. He nodded. 30 seconds had not yet expired. I returned my hand to the envelope and felt the embossed notary seal under my thumb texture of a promise kept. This, I said, lifting it, is a letter from Dr. Ramirez, a neuropsychologist who evaluated me less than a fortnight ago. It says what is true and refuses what is convenient. I will read precisely 2 lines, and then we will all give our full attention back to the bride and groom. Olivia's protest came quick. Clara, this is 30 seconds, I said, gentle as a lullaby. You'll like the brevity. I slid the sheet free. The paper made that crisp sound that says real. My eyes caught the sentence I had asked the doctor to add, the one that carried both fact and intention. And because a promise is a kind of music, I honored mine 2 lines and only that. I lifted the page toward the lights and the faces and the careful flowers. I drew breath. Lowered my shoulders, and let my voice be as ordinary as a kitchen radio. 2 lines I promised, and kept it. I read slowly enough for people who pretend not to listen to accidentally hear neuropsychological evaluation indicates no evidence of neurocognitive disorder. Executive functioning, memory, and judgment fall within expected to above expected ranges for age. Evaluation conducted within the last 2 weeks. That was all. I folded the letter halfway, the seal still visible like a small moon, and I stepped back from the mic. The room made a new sound, half exhale, half chair scrape. You could feel people revise their internal captions. It wasn't dramatic, it was administrative. Paper had done what rumor couldn't end a sentence with a period. Olivia moved first. Clara, she said brightly, we're so glad you feel... She caught herself on the pronoun and pivoted. That you're doing well. Of course, tests can be, limited. We just want what's best. Tests are limited, I agreed, and held the folded page where the first row could still see the letterhead. Which is why I brought date signatures and a notary who believes in office lighting. Humor ticked softly inside me, a tiny metronome that kept panic from composing its own score. If receipts were confetti, this room would be ready for the recessional. If concern charged by the hour, some people here would need a payment plan. If best for you had a returns policy, I'd be first in line. A useful academic phrase because weddings are secretly seminars drifted across my thoughts' common knowledge. A fact becomes more than a fact when everyone knows that everyone knows it. 5 minutes ago, people had private doubts about the things they'd heard. Now there was a stamped letter standing in the middle of the room. No one needed to say they believed it. They just needed to know that the room knew. I turned to Samuel and his bride. Now back to you. I offered the mic to the MC, who accepted it like a lifeguard, receiving a child back from the deep end. But the MC, bless him, knew that transitions deserve grace. Thank you, Grandma Clara, he said, and the room practiced a small, respectful applause, the kind that promises not to become a spectacle. As I stepped down, Olivia reached for the page. Let me file that somewhere safe. Thank you, I said, not unkindly, and pivoted so she took a handful of hydrangea air. The venue coordinator can keep a copy with the event paperwork if anyone needs calm later. I handed the coordinator a second envelope, the copy I'd made for exactly this moment. Her eyebrows lifted in the universal expression, for ma'am has a plan. Michael stood up, then sat again twice like a man testing the floor. I put a hand to his forearm as I passed. Enjoy the toasts, I said, without weight on the words. Sometimes mercy is the quiet permission not to perform a backbone in public. Odd fact of the day: imprinting a widow is a single lonely word stranded on a new page. Typesetters hate them. Grief does that to people too, leaves them isolated lines at the top of a fresh chapter. Tonight I had refused the layout. I would not be the widow at the edge of the page. Back in my chair, still near the bins, because chairs are not crowns. I slid the letter into its sleeve and felt the odd lift that comes when a fight chooses paperwork instead of volume. A server ghosted by, and with a conspirator's wink, swapped my wobbly chair for one that didn't sigh. Quiet kindness is a stealth technology. The best man took the mic and told a sweet story about Samuel learning to change a tire in the rain. The maid of honor followed with a tale of the bride's disastrously blue hair in high school. Laughter loosened the room's shoulders by degrees. The quartet found their balance again. A small boy near the bar discovered a roll on the floor and declared it treasure, which is not wrong. Olivia edged nearer to the head table, recalibrating. That's her art. To watch her is to witness live editing, cut the rumor paste, a new one export before anyone notices the compression artifacts. She leaned to the bride's mother, whispering with the intensity of a person trying to stitch a parachute on the way down. I didn't try to eavesdrop. I had done the only thing age has guaranteed me the right to do. I let truth sit still in a chair and do its oxygen work. A thing I've learned with age. The kind of simple wisdom you only trust after it's taken you years to arrive. If you don't define yourself, the room will do it for you. And rooms take their cues from the loudest available story. It isn't noble, but it is navigable. Tonight I had supplied a louder story by using a quieter tool. In game theory terms, I'd offered a costly signal time-testing notarization. Gossip is cheap, evidence is not. People update their priors when you make updating easy. The MC nodded me a quick, grateful look. Between toasts, the small salute professionals give civilians who make their jobs simpler. The coordinator, clipboard saint, tucked my copy into a labeled sleeve. She would outlive us all in the venue's filing cabinet, ready to be rediscovered by some future manager who opens a drawer and wonders why Montgomery Wedding Grandmother's letter has a tab of its own. Paper has a longer attention span than rumor. That's one of its mercies. A cousin passed. My table paused and squeezed my shoulder. "You look good," she said, surprised to find the sentence true. Then, embarrassed by her own astonishment, she fled into the dancing crowd of toasts. We forgive small awkwardness in the generous. It's the weaponized courtesy that requires armor. The cake rolled by on its cart, towering with buttercream flowers, piped so precisely even the bees might be fooled. I allowed myself a moment to adore it. Beauty in a room can be an ally when you're trying not to become scenery. Grandma Samuel mouthed across the space when our eyes met, and he pressed his hand to his heart. I didn't need the sound to know the words. Some languages are fluency by relation. I lifted my water glass in return. We didn't need a speech between us. Olivia regrouped, poured attention like gasoline, where she could. "Isn't the floral scape divine? The photographer is elite. Clara so spirited, it's inspiring." The last one came out like a compliment wrapped around a sedative. Spirited is what you call a woman when competent would stick in your throat. I let it float past. Not every ball needs catching. I made 3 small jokes in my notebook to keep my insides aligned. If spirited were a label, my bottle would read 80 proof clarity. If a filing cabinet could clap, I'd be getting a standing ovation from drawer B. If chairs had feelings, my old one just texted, "No hard feelings, queen." The quartet slid into something tender. The MC announced dinner. Plates arrived. With that choreography only banquets know. Synchronized domes lifted steam, released a gentle chorus of enjoy. I tasted everything and found that food, when not seasoned with humiliation, can still be delicious. There was one more small thing to do, entirely private. I wrote a single line on a card and slipped it to the coordinator. If any vendor receives clarifying questions about me after tonight, please share this number. It was Attorney Lee's direct line. Not a threat, a boundary written in a professional font. Olivia's orbit stayed wide for the next hour. Michael ventured near once with a plate of rolls. "You okay, Mom?" "I'm fine," I said, and meant the uninteresting version of fine, the kind that needs no follow-up. Eat while it's warm. He nodded relief, visible shame still camped behind his eyes. Growth is not a spectator sport. I excused myself from coaching him in public. By coffee, the room had settled into something like peace. Not perfection, that's a country weddings rarely visit, but a livable truce. The letter in my wrap carried no magic, but it had done an honest thing. It had returned the evening to its rightful owners. As the lights dimmed a notch for the first dance, I felt the oddest gratitude for paper, for processes, for the way truth can be small and still be enough. I brushed the envelope's edge with my fingertips, not a sword, not a shout, just a page that refused to be convenient. Tomorrow would bring its own paperwork. People who trade in rumors seldom retire after one ruined investment. But tonight, I let the music swell and gave myself a small earned rest. Dinner settled the room like a warm blanket, and for a little while I let it. Forks found their tasks, candles softened the edges of things. Across the dance floor, Samuel laughed at something his bride whispered, and the sound made the fairy lights look earned. But rooms remember their other agenda. I could hear it in the drift of conversation that leaked between songs. Well, at least the inheritance will keep her comfortable. David will manage everything when the time comes. Good that the family will, guide her. The new roomer had swapped costumes. If my mind couldn't be the story, my money would do. Here's a piece of elder wisdom I didn't have at 40 and didn't deserve until 60. You cannot negotiate with a story that needs you smaller. You replace it. Not with a louder opinion, but with a better fact. So I reached into my wrap, not for the doctor's letter this time, but for a thinner envelope labeled in my own hand, Legacy. I had promised myself I wouldn't turn a wedding into a courtroom. I also promised myself I would not leave this room with a single person believing they could manage me like a portfolio. Two promises can live together if you let grace drive and facts navigate. I waved the coordinator over. She leaned down the way good coordinators do, ears trained to hear the thing you don't say. "Could we add a 30-second housekeeping note?" I asked. For the sake of fewer questions later. Her eyes did a quick calculus. "After the salad plates," she said. "A soft chime, I'll hand you a handheld mic by the guest book. It'll feel adjacent. Translation, not a speech, not a scene. An announcement like telling people where to find the restrooms. Perfect. Odd fact of the day. Benjamin Franklin left money in trust for Boston and Philadelphia that paid out only after 1 and then 2 centuries. A bequest can be a time machine if you draw the calendar carefully enough. It isn't the money that matters. It's the message that outruns you." When the salads cleared, the chimes sounded little crystal notes, as if the room were practicing listening again. I stood near the guest book, not the head table, because humility and clarity aren't enemies. The coordinator pressed the mic into my hand. No spotlight, no drum roll, just a voice with some paper behind it. "Friends," I said, keeping it casual, "quick housekeeping while the tiramisu strategizes." A couple of chuckles good. Kitchens deserve their own verbs. Some of you have asked very kind questions about how I'm doing. Thank you. I'm all right. And because kindness sometimes invites clarity, here's mine. I updated my will and created a living trust last month. I did it while my coffee was hot and my mind was sharp. The trust names independent trustees and directs the bulk of my estate to scholarships at our community college, the library's adult literacy program, and the music department at Samuel School. The room did that half-still thing again, like a cat deciding whether to leap. I kept going, still easy. Family will receive gifts of memory letters, objects with stories attached, things that smell like love. Money, though, will go where it multiplies into opportunity. I'm telling you this now so you can put away any anxious guessing. This is not a fundraiser. I grinned, and I'm not passing a hat. It's just me filing a public update so the record is less tasty to rumor. Olivia took a step, smile glazed. Clara, that's generous, but wouldn't it be wiser to let a room hear a settled decision, I said, still gentle. Wisdom and paperwork are on speaking terms in my house. Academic phrase for the evening commitment device. Behavioral economists use it for actions that bind your future self to your present choice, like putting your phone in another room to write or scheduling a 6 a.m. class so you'll actually exercise. A trust in this case is my commitment device. It keeps my generosity from arguing with somebody else's plans when I'm not in the room. I held up a card no bigger than a recipe. If you love me enough to worry, here's a summary sheet for your peace trustees' names, what the trust funds, and the lawyer to call if a rumor needs a nap. Take one if it helps you enjoy the cake without doing math. Humor snuck in where it fits best, small, accurate kind. If rumors earned interest, this family would be an endowment. If just helping came with invoices, some folks would be audited. If paperwork were cardio, I'd be training for a marathon. Aunt Marjorie from the side, with the best potato salad, plucked a card and nodded. The way people nod when a knot in the brain finally finds the end of its thread. Michael watched me exhale, visible. He knew what this meant, no managing momshell game later. Relief looks a lot like posture. Someone near the hydrangeas murmured, "So nothing to fight over." Exactly. I smiled at that sentence like it had paid me a compliment, because it had. "Back to the bride and groom," I said, and handed the mic to the coordinator as if it were slightly warm. The quartet slid into something bright. The servers resumed their dance. Joy returned to its proper job. I tucked the empty envelope away and let my shoulders drop. Inside my chest, some click I can only describe as alignment. Not triumph, not even relief. Just the feeling of being accurately placed in my own life. We chase that sensation in so many wrong directions: approval control, high drama. Turns out sometimes it's a stack of signed pages and the decision not to apologize for them. Aging observation you can take or leave. Past a certain age, ownership softens into stewardship. The trick is to choose what you steward on purpose. People, places, practices. Paper can help you do it cleanly. I tasted my coffee hot, merciful, undramatic, and let my gaze rest on Samuel and his bride as they practiced their first slow steps on a crowded floor. Olivia hovered at a distance, jaw tight, recalculating. She would find another script. People who need control always do, but the math had changed. Remove a prize and you remove a motive. That's not cynicism, it's design. Patricia texted from 2 tables over, just a single emoji of a file folder and a heart. I texted back a tiny gavel and a cupcake, which is our code for justice but sweet. I wrote 3 lines in my notebook to pin the moment to something sturdier than memory. If legacy had a sound tonight, it sounded like a door gently closing on nonsense. If dignity were a beverage, it would taste like hot coffee you brewed yourself. And me, I am not a plot device in someone else's inheritance story. I am the author of my own footnotes. The dance floor filled. The bins behind my old chair did whatever bins do, unobtrusive. Someone wheeled the cake closer, and the room briefly forgot all sociology in favor of buttercream. I let myself be one of them. Tomorrow could bring pushback, calls, questions, delicate clarifications. That's all right. I have a folder labeled Access and one labeled Clarity. and a lawyer who is better at morning emails than most songbirds are at dawn. More importantly, I have what rumor can't eat a quiet room inside myself that is finally mine.
I sipped. I watched. I breathed. Then I folded my napkin into a small square, and for the first time all evening, I felt entirely gloriously uninteresting. That feeling, friends, is underrated. There's a particular calm that follows paperwork, the kind you feel when a stubborn window finally gives and slides open. After the trust announcement, the room relaxed into dinner, and for a few blessed minutes I let it. But a new current ran under the tablecloths. If not her mind, then her money. If not her money, then her character. Rumor is adaptive, like ivy, it looks for the next surface to climb.
I didn't want spectacle. I wanted air. So I chose something small, factual, and most importantly, finishable. When dessert forks arrived, the coordinator gave me that raised eyebrow question only professionals can do. Now I nodded. She handed me the handheld mic near the guest book, away from the head table, out of the spotlight's habit. I smiled at the crowd like we were all in the kitchen and the coffee had just beeped.
Friends.
I said, easy as steam. You've been generous with your attention tonight. I have one last very quick housekeeping note, and then the evening belongs entirely to the bride and groom, where it should have stayed all along. A ripple of laughter earned by brevity alone. Some of you may have heard stories about me, I continued, keeping my voice the temperature of warm bread. That I'm confused in the evenings, that I misplace important things, that I should let others make decisions for my own good. Stories like these do a tricky thing. They dress up control as care. Olivia took a step, lacquered smile returning. Clara, no one here wants a lecture, I said, smiling back. Neither do I. That's why I brought footnotes. I held up a thin packet the size of a program. This is a one-page erratum, my favorite publishing word. When a mistake slips into print, the publisher tucks in an erratum, a small, precise correction. I've printed a few for anyone who needs one. Odd fact of the day, the word libel traces back to libellus Latin, for little book, because reputations used to be attacked by pamphlet. Tonight's pamphlet is boring on purpose, dates signatures, the telephone numbers of people who answer on weekdays. I set a small stack by the guest book. If you were told something worrying about me by anyone, take a copy. No drama, just daylight. A soft murmur rolled through the room like a tide deciding to come in. The MC, bless him, didn't flinch. He knew small truths land better than big theatrics. Also, I said, keeping the tone conversational, I want to thank our vendors, the staff, the musicians, the photographer for making this night beautiful. If you receive follow-up clarifications about me later, here's the number of my attorney. Please send any questions there so you can keep your art focused on joy. I tapped the card clipped to each packet. Humor, my old life raft, bobbed up at the perfect time. If rumors came with warranties, I'd be asking for a full refund plus store credit. If just checking on you had a loyalty program, some folks would be diamond tier. If facts were frosting, I promise there's enough for the whole cake. A smattering of relieved laughs. Laughter, when it arrives without meanness, resets the lung. I didn't name Olivia, not once. I didn't need to. A thing I learned late, but specificity isn't always about people. It's about patterns. For anyone studying along at home, I added lightly, there's an academic phrase for how stories catch fire, a reputation cascade. Once a claim feels popular, people repeat it to avoid being the odd one out. You can stop the cascade with one unfancy tool verification. I lifted a packet slightly. This is mine. Across the room, Michael stared at the floor like it contained a map he should have read sooner. Samuel's bride watched me with the careful hope of a woman measuring whether truth will cost more than it pays. Samuel himself, God bless that steady heart, gave me the smallest nod as if to say, "Finish strong, then come sit down."
Finally, I said, I want to be clear about tone. This is not anger. It's alignment. This is not punishment. It's boundary. Weddings deserve soft hands and firm edges. So, soft hand, thank you truly for being here to love these two. Firm edge, if you have a question about me, ask me. If you're offered a story about me, ask who benefits if you believe it.
Olivia opened her mouth, then closed it. There are moments when a person realizes the room they curated now has mirrors. I turned to the couple. Sweethearts, I apologize for taking any oxygen tonight. That wasn't my hope, and it won't be my habit. I've said what I needed to say so that your joy doesn't have to dodge shadows. The MC took a half step forward, host as lifeguard again. I placed the mic in his palm like returning a borrowed teacup. And now he said, voice warm, let's pour everything back where it belongs. The quartet found an agreeable key, waiters moved like choreography conversation, returned to its rightful topics, shoes, speeches, the cake's engineering. On my way back to my seat, new chair, bless the stealth angel who swapped it. Two small things happened that mattered more than applause. A server whispered, "Thank you for the number. That helps." And the photographer, a woman my granddaughter's age, slipped a note into my hand. "You looked exactly like the person in your own story." I tucked both into my wrap, paper souvenirs of a night I refused to let become a circus. Olivia hovered at the edge of my table. "Clara," she said, "the sugar thin. Now you're making people uncomfortable." Uncomfortable is what truth feels like when it moves furniture. I answered, keeping my voice so gentle, even the flowers relaxed. But look, people are already breathing again. 3 more sentences, because I had learned to count my words like medicine. I won't argue with you here. I won't argue with you later. If something needs saying, it will arrive on letterhead. She blinked. People who weaponize ambiguity dislike envelopes. By the coffee service, Aunt Marjorie picked up a packet, then another. "One for me," she said, "and one for whoever corners me by the coat rack." Not all angels have clipboards. Some bring potato salad and an appetite for clarity. I sat. I breathed. And because I promised myself not to end the night in defense posture, I watched the first dance with my whole face. The bride leaned her head against Samuel's shoulder. He mouthed the chorus like a prayer. The bins behind my old chair did their quiet work, unsentimental, unashamed. Perhaps that's the final lesson: refuse to be scenery for someone else's smallness, and you discover you never needed their stage. In my notebook, I wrote 3 small lines to put a pin in it. If dignity had decibels, mine speaks at conversation level and carries. If boundaries had a scent, tonight smelled faintly of toner and lemon oil. And me, I am not auditioning for anyone's version of me. I'm reading from a script I wrote in ink. The coordinator brushed by and tapped the stack of packets. "Half gone already," she whispered, not triumphantly, just helpfully, like noting how many cups are left by the punch bowl. Good. That meant fewer phone calls later and more room for cake. I let the music do its cotton-soft thing and felt with a quiet astonishment that still surprises me at my age safe. Not because the world had turned gentle, because I had. I stayed long enough to watch the first dance finish and the room remember how to smile. That felt important, like putting a period at the end of the sentence before starting a new paragraph. Then I did what every woman of a certain age learns to do if she wants to keep the day from stealing. Tomorrow I planned my exit while my feet still trusted my knees. Elder wisdom filed under leave while you still like everyone. I waved the coordinator over. "I'm going to slip out after cake," I said. "No fanfare. If anyone asks, tell them I'm saving my ankles for the next grandchild's reception." She nodded, grateful to be handed a solvable problem. Good coordinators collect solvable problems the way seashells collect shorelines. Across the room, Olivia recalibrated yet again, orbit tightening toward Samuel. I could feel the static build, the kind that turns conversations into small, hot things. The fundamental attribution error was busy. Tonight, people mistaking behavior for character and forgetting about context. If an older woman reads one notarized letter, she's dramatic. If a younger woman rearranges a seating chart to humiliate someone, she's detail-oriented. Same table, different caption. The photographer, young, precise eyes like a metronome, stopped by with a quick professional smile. "Mrs. Whitman, could I get one more of you with the couple after cake?"
Of course, I said. 2 minutes, 3 clicks. I promise not to blink.
Odd fact of the day in theater, the final pose at the end of a song is called the button. It gives the audience permission to clap. I decided to give this evening a button of my own, something small and clean that said, "That's the moment, thank you. We can all breathe now." Cake happened. The way cake always happens. A cheer, a slice. Someone pretending not to cry because buttercream is a terrible thing to salt. Olivia hovered, waiting for a seam to pull. I didn't provide one. I complimented the frosting, kissed the bride's cheek, and reminded Samuel to save a piece for tomorrow. Cake tastes like promise the morning after. Then the photographer raised her hand like a conscientious student. Couple plus grandma, we stepped to a patch of light near the hydrangeas. 3 clicks, no blink. "Perfect," she said, genuine. "You look exactly like yourself." "Good," I said. I worked hard to be. Joke number 1, quiet enough not to rattle the vases. If authenticity were a filter, I'd be a 1-click edit. Olivia made her move, then gliding in beside the photographer. "One with the whole immediate family," she said, adding a sugar coat you could chip a tooth on. "Just to show unity." "Unity is a lovely word," I replied, stepping half an inch so the lens could see around the lacquer. "But let's not make the album lie. Take as many as you like. I'll use the ones where everyone looks like who they are." The photographer held her neutral face, which is the professional way of choosing truth. Click, click, done. I thanked the staff, servers, busboys, the woman who kept rescuing my chair. Then I slid a small neutral statement across the coordinator's clipboard, a printed paragraph with my signature at the bottom. It read in the calm tone of a reliable appliance manual that any future inquiries about my health or finances should be directed to Dr. Ramirez or Attorney Lee, whose numbers followed. "To reduce confusion post-event," the header said. A sentence without spikes. "Boundaries don't need barbs, they need addresses." For the photographer, I offered a similar note. "This just protects your inbox," I said. "If anyone attempts retroactive edits to reality, forward this," and carry on. She laughed softly. "I prefer light correction to heavy revision." "Me too," I said. Joke number 2, filed under post-production with a pulse. I found Michael by the coffee. He looked like a man who had almost found a thought and then misplaced it in the coat room. "You're leaving?" he asked a little boy, peeking out through the adult. "I am," I said. "Before my shoes file a complaint. I should walk you out." "You should dance with your son's grandmother," I said, and let the sentence wear 2 meanings at once. His wife's mother and me, the original. He managed a smile big enough to survive later. On my way to the door, I passed Aunt Marjorie, handing out my erratum sheets like recipe cards. "If anyone corners you by the bathroom," she instructed. "A cousin, hand them this and point at the dance floor. Bless the lay clergy of common sense." Near the exit, Olivia intercepted last attempt dressed in civility. "Clara, it would look better if you stayed through the bouquet toss." "Looking better is what clothes are for," I said. "Feeling right is what bones are for. Mine are telling me to go." I kept my voice soft enough that only the nearest table could eavesdrop without effort. If truth whispers, people must lean toward it. That's a better posture for listening. She switched scripts. "People will talk." "They always do," I said. "But now they'll have to talk around paper." Joke number 3, because leaving deserves a smile. If gossip were cardio, this family could cancel its gym memberships. Outside, night had settled into that velvet hour where neon looks forgiving. The air tasted like sugar and distant rain. I waited by the curb while the valet fetched my car and let my chest catch up with my ribs. Exits do that, they make the body summarize. I composed a text to the venue from my notes app, neutral, courteous, precise. Thank you for hosting a beautiful event. If staff receive any requests to modify records, images, or accounts pertaining to my presence or condition, please direct those requests to the attached contacts. My goal is to prevent post-event confusion and keep your team focused on celebration rather than mediation. With appreciation, CW attach PDFs of the letters, names, numbers, send, simple. Then I sent 2 short emails, one to Dr. Ramirez, letting her know the letter did what truth does when given a microphone. The other to Attorney Lee's subject line, post-event calm, confirming that trustees' codes and notifications remained as set. Paperwork hums best when you tune it like a fridge, low, constant, reliable. A tiny courtesy to myself, the kind I didn't know to grant at 40, I named the good part out loud. You did what you said, I whispered. You used paper instead of pain. Not triumph, not even relief. Alignment. The inner furniture moved to where it belonged. The car eased up. The valet, a kid with the commendable dignity of an excellent posture, opened the door. Good night, ma'am, he said, the syllables unpretentious and intact. Good work in there, I told him. You kept a lot of small things from becoming big things. People rarely hear that kind of thank you. It's the true currency of events. As we pulled away, I looked back once. Through the high windows, I saw Samuel spin his bride under those insistent lights, a living proof that joy can continue in a room where truth has finally found oxygen. I didn't bless them with my hand. I blessed them by leaving them the air. At home, I put my wrap on the chair Edward used to claim, set the envelopes on the hallway table like obedient dogs, and put on water for tea. I wrote in my notebook just a few lines for the archive. If exits had etiquette, it would say, leave early enough to send a thank you and sleep. If boundaries were architecture tonight, I installed a door that swings and locks. And me, I am finished auditioning for other people's stories. I'm closing the stage and opening a window. The kettle clicked. I turned off the lights, let the house settle, and allowed quiet to do what it does best, proofread the day. Monday morning began with the soft hiss of the kettle and the rain practicing scales against the kitchen window. I let the steam warm my face and told my shoulders kindly that we had work to do, but none of it required adrenaline. Elder wisdom of the day. When the problem is paperwork, courage looks like a pen that doesn't skip. I opened my notebook and wrote 3 verbs at the top of a clean page document: direct, de-escalate. It's a little recipe for grown-ups. Document so memory can rest. Direct so gossip has an address. De-escalate so you don't accidentally feed the very fire you're trying to smother. Attorney Lee had offered me the first appointment of the day, 9 a.m., the hour when coffee is still honest. Her office smelled like dry paper and faint jasmine. Outside, traffic hummed the city's pulse. Inside, we made ours slower on purpose. She greeted me with that unflappable half-smile lawyers must practice in the mirror. How did the wedding go? Loud, I said, but the paper sang in tune. I passed her the folder marked Event. Inside my speech notes, the neuropsych letter, the trust summary, the contact cards we'd already laminated like small shields. I added a fresh page, a neutral statement I'd given the venue and photographer on my way out. She scanned, nodded, and reached for a template. We'll send 2 letters today. First, a cease and desist addressing any further false statements about your mental capacity or finances. Second, a preservation notice if disputes arise. Anyone spreading rumors is now on record to retain texts, emails, and social posts. Odd fact of the day. The word notary traces to the Latin notarius. A quick writer, someone trained to get the important parts down before the truth could run away. I like that outrun nonsense with speed and ink. Lie typed while I talked. We stayed specific to patterns, not names. Because specificity to behavior travels farther than a brawl. State that I have been evaluated within the last 2 weeks, I said. Point to the trust. Emphasize that any vendor harassment should route to your office, not to me. She looked up. You're wisely avoiding the Streisand effect. I refuse to make my own rumor go viral, I said. Strategic silence plus receipts. We printed on heavy letterhead, the kind that thuds slightly when you set it down. She slid the pages to me, and I signed with the Yuan theatrical flourish of a woman who has paid her light bill on time for 5 decades. The notary popped in, stamp embossed, that quiet little clunk that tells everyone a sentence just ended correctly. After law came money. Miss Patel at Seaport Savings had kept a chair for me that faced a window. Kind people arrange furniture with the weather in mind. We reviewed our code word, reconfirmed that all changes required me in person with identification. She added 2 more guardrails text alerts for any attempted access and a note on my file that said simply, call before courtesy. Translation, don't help a relative unless you've reached me. We placed travel holds on large transfers, 72-hour delays, so prudence could catch up with impulse, and activated credit bureau freezes. It's not paranoia, it's pest control. One more thing, Miss Patel said, lowering her voice the way bankers do when they're about to be human. If anyone arrives with tears and a story, I will give them a tissue and your lawyer's email. Back home, I brewed fresh tea and did small housekeeping. For my soul opened windows, aired the rooms, let the house edit last night's air. Then I called Dr. Ramirez's office to thank her team. We received a couple of polite verification calls already, her receptionist said. We answered with dates and went back to our day. That sentence felt like a weighted blanket. Phone buzzed, a text from the venue coordinator, FYI. A few inquiries this morning. I forwarded your statement and Lee's contact. Staff grateful for clarity. Also, the chair swap is now event lore. I smiled. Quiet heroics deserve footnotes. I like to punctuate heavy mornings with light errands, so I walked to the post office, raincoat, comfortable shoes, and mailed 3 certified envelopes, venue photographer, and yes, Olivia and Michael's address. The letters were bland on purpose. Declare the fact, state the boundary, provide the path. A boundary with directions is a kindness. Academic phrase for your pocket costly signaling. In messy social games, people update their beliefs when you show you've spent real resources, time, money, reputation to back a claim. Tests, trusts, notarized notices, they're not flair, they're proof I mean it. One more reason I prefer paper to performance paper: doesn't get dramatic when contradicted. It gets referenced. Around noon, Patricia knocked as if she were returning a casserole dish from 1987. I brought soup and a victory lap, she said, parking herself at my table. I handed her a copy of the cease and desist. She read the first paragraph and grinned. This is like a velvet rope for your life. Tripping hazard for busybodies, I said, but yes. She told me 2 things I needed to hear: that the room last night started laughing again after I left, and that laughter is a good omen for a family. Joy wants to survive, she said. You made it easier for it. We ate in the comfortable silence of old friends who have shared both hospital coffee and birthday cake. Rain softened to a mist. The windows went mad with it. The house felt not only safe, but proportioned, like the furniture had learned its scale again. The phone rang. Michael. I let it go to voicemail and listened there because voicemails let you inhale between sentences. "Mom," he said, voice threadbare. I saw the letters. I'm not proud of how I've been. I'd like to talk when you're ready. Not about money. About me being your son better. There it was, a sentence worth keeping. I wrote it down in the notebook because sometimes we remember people more accurately if we transcribe their best lines. Humor keeps the floor from tilting, so I gifted myself 3 small ones right then. If legal stationery were cologne today, I'd smell like eau de notary. If boundaries burned calories, I could skip the senior center treadmill. If common sense paid dividends, Patricia would chair my board. Afternoon. I did 2 more things that made the future a little easier to carry. First, I set up a small P.O. box and directed all concerned citizen mail there. Let the Postal Service earn its keep. Second, I drafted a healthcare proxy addendum. Patricia first, my friend Ruth second. I love my family, but love works better when not asked to referee. A neighbor dropped by with a newspaper clipping and a question thinly disguised as curiosity. "So, are you really giving it all away?" she asked, trying to make it sound like admiration. I gave her the same answer I'd give the mirror: I'm keeping what I love. I'm stewarding what others need. She nodded, disarmed by the verbs. Verbs do that. They put subjects to work. By 5, the rain had rinsed the street clean. I took a slow walk, umbrella doing its small cathedral impression, and let my mind catalog the day: letters, out accounts, locked rumors, routed systems humming. Not triumphant, aligned. There's a difference and the body knows it. Back home, I wrote the day's closing lines so future me wouldn't have to hunt for the feeling later. If peace were a filing system today, I labeled the drawers and oiled the rails. If truth were a thermostat, paperwork set the temperature and the room remembered how to breathe. And me, I am not preparing for war. I am maintaining a garden with fences, yes, but also with gates that open for the right knock. Odd fact to tuck under your pillow: 19th century letter scales let people weigh a page so precisely they could pay the exact postage. I like that image for a life: write what's necessary, weigh it, and send it where it belongs. Today I weighed my words, paid the right price, and mailed them to the future. I washed the teacup, turned off the lamp, and let the clock practice its seconds again. The house kept its promises back to me: quiet proportion, a door that locks, and a window that opens. Tomorrow can bring what it brings. Tonight the paper is dry, the ink is set, and my name is legible to me. Wednesday brought the kind of light that forgives a kitchen cloud, bright, even easy on the counters. I was stirring honey into tea when my phone buzzed with a message that felt like a door knocking from the inside. "Grandma, can I come by this afternoon?" Just me. I want to apologize properly and talk. Samuel. I told my shoulders to relax, they're always the last to get the memo, and texted back. 3 o'clock. I'll make something that isn't buttercream. I did not stage the house. No legal folders on the table like trophies. No envelopes displayed like museum labels. I set out mugs, washed grapes, sliced the loaf. Ordinary is where truth rests best. At 2:59, he was on the porch, hair damp from a shower he'd taken on purpose, shirt tucked with the awkward care of a man trying to respect a room. When he stepped in, the hug surprised us both by being immediate and uncomplicated. There are mercies in blood and time that paperwork can't replicate. "I'm sorry," he said, not sitting yet. "For the seat, for the gossip, for putting you in a position where you had to defend yourself in a room that was supposed to be for joy." Elder wisdom of the day: apologies are not coupons. They don't entitle you to a discount on future behavior, but they can open a window. We sat. He cupped his mug like it might organize his thoughts. "I didn't see it," he said. About the seat, I delegated seating to Mom and the planner, and I told myself not to micromanage. I wanted to be, he laughed without humor, chill. Chill is a freezer setting, not a leadership strategy, I said softly. He grinned despite himself. He ran a hand over his jaw, a gesture Michael had taught him by accident. After you left, a few people asked me quietly what that letter was. The coordinator told me you'd given her a copy for calm. She said it exactly like that. He glanced up. You were calm, Grandma. I'm proud of that. I felt that sentence collect itself in a neat little place behind my ribs and sit down there polite and glowing. Thank you, I said. That matters. He took a breath. I need to say the other part too. Mom's been curating a story for months. I didn't challenge it because I told myself planning a wedding was hard enough. Pluralistic ignorance, right? You think everyone else believes it, so you act like you do too. That's on me. Odd fact of the day, the word apology originally meant a formal defense, not a confession, apologia, a recent argument for your case. Somewhere along the timeline, we retooled it toward accountability. The best apologies tend to braid both explanation without excuse, responsibility without self-flagellation, repair without theater. He set his mug down. So here's mine in 3 parts. 1, I knew better than to let anyone seat you by a bin. I can't fix the past, but I can say it out loud. Noted, I said, and meant the kind version of noted, which is written down in the Book of Us, where we keep the sentences we want to reread. 2, he continued, I won't let people use your name as a character in their plot. If someone brings you up as a problem to solve, I'll redirect them to you or to facts. No more triangulation. Good, I said. I won't be a middle in anyone's triangle. Differentiation is the grown-up art, loving your family while being yourself in front of them. And 3, he said, voice steady. Now, I want you in our life, but not as an ally against my parents, just as you. Dinner's calls helped me figure out how to fix a leaky sink without flooding the new floors. I couldn't help it. Humor woke up like a small, helpful dog. If apologies were currency, he's just covered first and last month's rent. If boundaries were IKEA, we finally found the right Allen wrench. If leaky sinks are tests of adulthood, I intend to cheat by phone. I poured more tea. Samuel, I'm not here to recruit you for a team. I'm here to love you. That includes refusing to be used for leverage. I let the sentence wear its work clothes. I won't text you commentary about your parents. If I have a concern, I'll bring it to the person who can fix it. He nodded, eyes bright in the way that says, water has arrived but won't fall. Thank you. He hesitated. Can I ask about the trust people always assume money equals love? I don't want to be the reason anyone thinks you chose a charity over me. You are not, I said. I chose function over friction. Money in families can be a game with no winners. I wanted to make sure my love shows up as time attention letters, presents, not as numbers that encourage bad math. He laughed. Bad math, the kind where 1 cousin equals 5 lawyers. Exactly. I slid a small envelope across the table. Inside, a letter to him and his bride, handwritten with a story about the first apartment I shared with Edward and the potholder we almost set on fire. This is your inheritance, starter kit, I said. More letters will follow on birthdays and the occasional Tuesday. They come with recipes and instructions on where to find the good discount bulbs. He opened it, scanned a line, and pressed it to his chest. This feels like you. That's the point, I said. Paper, when not weaponized, can be a hug that keeps its edges. He told me small wedding stories. The room didn't have time to hear how his best man cried into a napkin, how the baker stepped in to fix a wobbly tear, how his bride's grandmother whispered, "Your love is taller than your cake." We laughed and let Normal stitch the room. Then he grew serious. Grandma Mom will be angry. At me, at you, at the fact that paper exists. I can't control that. But I can control this. He took out his phone, typed, and showed me a contact labeled Grandma Direct. No group chats, no intermediaries. If I'm foolish, you can tell me privately. If I'm wise, you can tell me publicly. Deal, I said. My compliments are louder than my corrections anyway. He stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. The photographer sent a proof of our picture, the one with you near the hydrangeas. She captioned it, "Witness, not audience." He smiled. "I'd like to frame it for our hallway. May I?" "That would be a kindness to your future selves," I said. "Let it remind you to be witnesses for each other too." At the door, he hugged me again, longer. "I love you. I love you more than buttercream," I said, which is a binding oath. After he left, the house resumed its polite breathing. I washed the mugs and thought about family systems, the way we pull and release, the way one person's clarity can lower the room's emotional temperature by a few merciful degrees. That's not martyrdom, it's thermostat work. I wrote 3 lines in my notebook for the day. He'll need to borrow my words. If truth is a gift, wrap it in brevity and hand it over without a speech. If love is a boundary, draw it with a pencil. You can edit as you grow. And you, Samuel, be the person in your own story who chooses the kind of brave that doesn't need an audience. Odd fact to end on: lighthouse keepers used to log the weather every hour, not to control the sea, but to respect it. Relationships are like that. You can't command the tide, but you can keep a faithful record and keep the light on. Today the weather cleared enough for a safe entry. Tomorrow we'll check again. I closed the notebook, the pages making that small, satisfied sound paper makes when it agrees with what you wrote on it. Then I let the afternoon be exactly what it was: quiet, proportion, friendly to bones. 6 months is long enough for a life to learn a new gait. The house breathes evenly now. The clock no longer sounds like a metronome for panic. I still keep the folders, clarity, access, legacy, but they live in the cabinet like winter coats present, comforting, rarely needed. The best paperwork ages into reassurance. On Mondays, I volunteer at the library's adult literacy program. The room smells faintly of dust and possibility, and the tables are nicked with the history of other people's pencils. I sit across from a woman my granddaughter's age who wants to read job applications without asking for help. We sound out words together: maintenance benefits, dependable, and every syllable conquered feels like someone quietly unlocked a door. She laughs at my corny reward system, a sticker sheet and peppermint candies, but she keeps the stickers. Peppermints dissolve, proof sticks. Odd fact of the day: library cards used to be little paper slips that got stamped and stamped until they softened at the corners like old bread. Now they're plastic, but the point remains: access beats ownership 9 days out of 7. On Wednesdays, I meet with the Community College Foundation to talk scholarship logistics. We settled on a rubric that makes room for grit as well as grades. Caring for a parent counts. Working night shifts counts. Getting back up counts. I insisted applicants answer a tiny question. What's a small thing you do well? If you can name your competence, you can usually grow it. The trustee smiled and wrote it down. That's the kind of smile you keep. Fridays, Patricia and I argue lovingly at book club. I take the chair near the lamp because my eyes and the print have a complicated relationship. She takes the one with the squeak because she claims it keeps the room honest. We debate plot like it owes us rent, and every time someone uses the word trope, we put $1 in a jar to buy the librarian fresh highlighters. We're funding a neon rainbow. Aging gives you the excellent privilege of small travel. We took 2-day trips by train coastline, 1 month, the botanical garden, the next. The garden had a greenhouse of orchids that looked like they'd written their own dress code, and a bonsai older than my knees. We ate soup from a cafe that spells soup like it's French, and we traded the kind of silence that has no homework attached. Michael calls on Sundays now. He talks about real things, leaky gutters recipes that surprised him. The way work feels like a treadmill set at a speed he didn't choose. He doesn't bring me stories about Olivia. I don't ask. Boundary as verb to boundary is to keep your sentences in their lanes so love doesn't have to dodge traffic. He's learning. So am I. Olivia tried 2 clarifications in the first month, polite emails to the venue and the photographer with a halo drawn around her subject line. The venue forwarded to Attorney Lee with a note that said, "Per our event file, please respond." The photographer replied with a JPEG of the contract and the phrase, "No retroactive edits." Both messages copied me because transparency is a polite lamp. Then I heard nothing more. Silence in the right key is restoration. There was one flare-up online. Someone posted a coy status with no names and many implications. Some elders forget what's best. So heartbreaking. A cousin tagged me with an emoji that translates as, "Are you seeing this?" I practice pre-bunking the academic idea that you can inoculate against misinformation by offering the tools to recognize it rather than wrestling each rumor by name. I posted a 2-sentence general truth. If a claim about a person's mind or money lacks date signatures and a path to verification, please treat it like fog, real enough to obscure, not solid enough to lean on. For anyone who needs clarity about me, call the numbers on this card. Then I logged off and iced a lemon loaf. Rumors want attention. Paperwork wants an inbox. Cake wants a plate. I honored each desire in turn. Humor keeps the floor steady. If social media came with torque specs, some folks would stop over-tightening the truth. If boundaries were SPF, I'm at factor 50 and aging nicely. If peace were cardio, my resting heart rate just set a personal best. Samuel and his bride invite me over twice a month for what they call civilized leftovers. We eat on mismatched plates that make the table look like it speaks multiple languages, and we practice repairs in both directions. He'll ask, "How do I fix a cabinet hinge that thinks gravity is optional?" And I'll ask, "How do I stop the news from living in my chest?" The answers are similar. Tighten the right screws, loosen the wrong ones, and take a walk between attempts. On their hallway wall, the photo from the wedding sits in a simple frame. The caption underneath, handwritten in the bride's neat print, reads, "Witness, not audience." I pretend not to cry and fail politely. At home, I keep writing letters to them. One for birthdays, one for anniversaries, one for no reason beyond. This recipe works, and so do you. Paper hugs keep well in drawer weather. I slip small bills inside, sometimes folded into shapes labeled not inheritance, just soup money. Money can either inflame or enable. Aim carefully. A neighbor asked me last week if I missed the drama. I laughed the way a person laughs when offered a hobby they've retired forever. I miss only the parts of the past that don't ask me to bleed. The rest can live in the archive labeled "We Learned." Elder wisdom of the week, nostalgia, is a spice. Use sparingly. Systems hum along the bank, pings me if anything blinks. The credit-free sleeps like a guard dog with good ears. We added a second trustee to the trust after the first move states, and the transition took 4 emails and no panic, a small masterpiece of boring. I send thank yous to the foundation staff the way some people water plants gently, regularly, understanding that gratitude is a maintenance fluid. Every month, Patricia and I host Admin Hour at the library, free help for adults who need to tame a document dragon. People bring shoeboxes, envelopes, phones filled with screenshots and hope. We show them how to fill out forms without crying, and if they cry anyway, we slide the box of tissues across like a relay baton. I teach a little talk called Receipts Not Reels, which is my way of saying a notarized page outruns a performative post. We end with 3 questions. What's the next smallest step? Who needs to know? Where will you put the paper when you're done? The answers shrink people's breathing back into their bodies. Academic phrase, to tape to your fridge, negativity bias, our ancient tendency to give bad news, the megaphone. I counter it with a ritual called 3 goods, stolen from a therapist who probably stole it from a grandmother. At day's end, I write 3 unimportant successes. Today's 1, didn't overwater the fern. 2, scheduled dental cleaning without bargaining with myself. 3, resisted rearranging the spice drawer as a coping mechanism. Small wins prove you exist. Michael came by yesterday with a step stool, 3 bulbs, and a face committed to penance, but not performance. He fixed the kitchen light we'd both ignored. I'm learning how to be useful without being loud, he said. It landed like a prayer that had done its homework. I gave him half a lemon loaf and a list of the next 3 tasks. Love Restructured is a to-do list you both sign. I still get the occasional sideways comment in the grocery line. Heard you're giving it all away, someone says with a tone that wants me to regret generosity. I answer truthfully, I'm keeping what I love and stewarding what multiplies. Most people don't know what to do with verbs that clean. They nod and we both return to produce. The last flare of the old campaign sputtered out last week when Olivia posted something aspirational about guarding elders with grace. Comments off. That's fine. I don't need her sentences. I need my systems. If the past knocks, it can leave a voicemail. If it brings flowers, they will sit politely in water until I decide whether they stay. Boundaries can be cordial. At night, I sometimes take out the photo from the wedding, the one by the hydrangeas, where I look exactly like myself, and I practice the small courage of recognition. You do not have to love every chapter of your story to love the protagonist. I love her now, especially in the scenes where she uses envelopes instead of applause. 3 closing chuckles to keep the lungs from getting dusty. If adulthood had a soundtrack, mine is the printer warming up. If serenity were a sport, I'm mostly on the bench, but I clap with conviction. If legacy had a dress code, it would be clean shoes labeled folders. 6 months in, I have learned to measure success by the decibel, less drama, more drawers closing softly. The house remembers me without asking for proof. The garden forgives my inconsistent watering schedule. The kettle speaks in its old friendly sibilance. I am not triumphant, just placed correctly within my life. That's the victory I wish for anyone, to hear your own name and feel your own bones answer present. Tonight before bed, I wrote a small note to future me tucked behind the labels in legacy. You did it the gentle way on purpose. Then I turned off the lamp, let the clock practice its seconds, and let the dark arrive without an agenda. By the time Autumn learned my address again, the house had a new sound, less like a museum and more like a porch. Doors opened, closed, opened. Letters came and went. The printer warmed up without being dramatic. Even the refrigerator settled into that friendly hum appliances use when they've forgiven you for ignoring the filter light. One Saturday, our little library hosted a reception for the first round of scholarship recipients. The room smelled like paperbacks and fresh coffee, 2 perfumes that will never fall out of fashion with me. Students milled around in shoes that hadn't broken in yet, holding plates they didn't have enough hands for. I pinned on a name tag that said simply Clara because dignity doesn't require a surname. Patricia arranged lemon bars like they were a lesson in geometry. Michael carried chairs without being asked, and miracle of miracles without narrating the effort. Samuel and his bride came too, bringing that bright steadiness young people loan to rooms on difficult budgets. The foundation director, made a short speech about access changing trajectories, a phrase that sounds like a textbook until you watch a woman hold her first set of textbooks with her own paycheck. Then it's just truth. Odd fact of the day: benediction comes from Latin bene, well, and dicere, to speak. A blessing is just someone speaking well over you. I like that. It's practical magic, and like all real magic, it works best when it's specific. After the reception, I went home and made myself a small recording, just me and the kitchen light at a kind angle. Not a speech, a note. I spoke to the lens the way I'd speak to you if you'd stop by with a pie and a problem. Good evening, I said. Tonight we practice a tiny art refusing to be smaller than our paperwork or our love. I told a short version of the wedding story, skipping the glitter and the grievance, landing instead on the folders with their plain names: Clarity, Access, Legacy. Academic phrase for the archive: self-determination theory. The psychologists say we thrive when we feel competent, connected, and in control of our choices. I didn't need the phrase to recognize the shape. Those 3 folders turned down the volume on my panic because they handed the volume knob back to me. The week unfolded in domestic minor keys. I reseasoned the cast iron pan Edward insisted would outlive us all. I finally replaced the porch bulb I had been negotiating with since June. I wrote a letter to each scholarship recipient naming one exact thing I admired in their application. Specificity is a quiet inheritance. It teaches people where the good hinges are. Humor kept me from varnishing the present into something it didn't need to be. If adulthood had a theme song, mine would be the printer warming up, then deciding we can behave. If Serenity had a gym, my membership would be walk around the block and don't buy another organizer. If Legacy had a dress code, I'm wearing clean shoes, labeled folders, and a decent cardigan. Elder wisdom of the day: repair happens in unglamorous increments. We talk about comeback arcs like fireworks, but most repair is a series of errands, return, this key update, that contact unlearn the reflex to narrate your hurt when silence would do the job better. I don't say this to make healing sound boring. I say it because boring is a mercy when you're done auditioning for chaos. There were still ripples because the past has a hobby of texting. Olivia sent a single line to Michael one afternoon. "Hope your mother is well." And he replied, "She is full stop." He didn't forward me the message, and I didn't ask. That's how peace stages itself, not with grand declarations, but with 2 people refusing to recruit a third. I did one other small thing for my future. I labeled a new folder, Rituals, and put 3 items in it: a copy of the Trust's annual report, a checklist for month-end sanity, clear the counters, clear the inbox, clear the mind, and a script titled "No is a complete sentence," which is exactly 2 words long. The older I get, the more I prefer my tools to fit in a pocket and my yeses to pass a background check. On a mild Sunday, Samuel and I walked to the farmer's market. We argued amiably about apples he trusts, Honeycrisp. I defect to Fuji, bought a loaf with more seeds than bread, and practice a skill I want my bones to remember, walking away from a conversation at the exact moment it becomes a performance. That's not rudeness, that's posture. I still talk to Edward sometimes, mostly while cleaning the stovetop, which you'd think would make the prayers smell like burnt butter. I tell him about the students, about Michael's slow good work, about the way the house has softened. I tell him the thing I didn't know how to name when he was here. Peace isn't the silence that follows battle. It's the quiet that precedes decisions you make on purpose. It's almost funny, the clean math of it. Remove the prize and the hunt loses interest. Remove the rumor's oxygen and the fire becomes a story about smoke. Remove the audience and you remember you never needed a stage. People will argue about motives and mistakes forever. That's the internet's favorite sport, but the human nervous system prefers paperwork and bedtime. Mine certainly does. Tonight, before the window decides to be a mirror, I'm going to pour tea, write 3 unimportant victories in the notebook, and choose to the best of my messy abilities to speak well over my own name. That's my benediction. Clara, be exactly your size. No smaller, no louder, no softer than kindness requires. And for you, if you're listening in a dark room with your fan humming its small white ocean, here's my wish. May you keep one folder labeled Clarity, even if it holds just a single page. May you keep one friend who texts you a gavel and a cupcake when justice is sweet. And may you keep one chair where you sit at your own table and feel the room say back to you present. If anyone seats you by a bin, literal or metaphorical, remember, chairs are not verdicts. Rise when you're ready, bring envelopes, bring humor, bring the version of love that sets temperatures instead of fires. I'll be here in the morning with coffee and fewer folders, which is another way of saying, I'll be here with a life that fits. Clara Whitman loses patience for polite cruelty the night she's seated beside the trash at her grandson Samuel's wedding, a placement designed by her daughter-in-law Olivia to reinforce a whisper campaign that Clara is slipping mentally. Rather than stage a scene, Clara uses receipts. She reads 2 calm lines from a fresh neuropsych evaluation confirming full capacity, then announces a living trust that sends her estate to scholarships, adult literacy, and Samuel's school music program. She distributes a 1-page erratum with contacts for verification, redirects vendors to her attorney, and exits early with dignity. In the days after Clara and her lawyer issue cease and desist and preservation notices, lock down bank access with code words and alerts, and add travel holds and credit freezes. She practices document direct, de-escalate, letting paper, not volume, carry the weight. Samuel visits to apologize and set a direct channel. They agree on boundaries that honor affection without recruiting allies. Michael, her son, begins repairing quietly. Olivia tries post-event clarifications, but vendors forward them to the attorney. The campaign cools without fresh oxygen. 6 months later, Clara's life is small in the best way, volunteering at the library's literacy program meeting with the foundation to award scholarships that value grit, arguing books with Patricia, and visiting the botanical garden. Systems hum. Boundaries are cordial. She writes letters to the newlyweds that function as paper hugs, gives out practical admin help at the library, and keeps 3 folders, Clarity, Access, Legacy, like winter coats, reassuring, rarely needed. Clara learns the graceful utility of evidence, the quiet art of boundaries, and the relief of choosing stewardship over inheritance fights. Her final benediction is simple. Keep 1 clear page, 1 loyal friend, 1 honest chair. If seated by a bin, rise, bring envelopes, humor, and the kind of love that sets